are ready to start? Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Shannon Miller with the Miller Elder Law Firm, and I am here with Todd Rovak with Carefull, the Carefull app, and he's going to talk today a little bit about what they do, what he's seeing, give us an overview of the app. I will tell you guys, I don't get any payment. I'm not, I have been with them from the beginning. I have loved them from the beginning. Todd and I go way back. This particular app just keeps getting better and better. And it's not even just an app anymore. It becomes this really cool resource for people who are trying to avoid, prevent exploitation. It's amazing. And I did, Todd, I'd love for you to do really a self intro. And if you could
Sure.
just tell us like the history of
Yeah,
where this started and where you're going and how things are, that would be
yeah.
amazing.
Happy to do it, and thank you for having me. I love talking to the Miller Elder Law Firm. It's you guys have been there since the beginning, and have your heads like right on the forefront of this stuff, which is changing all the time. So it's always nice to join you here. Thanks for having me. Um, so quickly, maybe a little background on me. I've been building technology products for about 20 years. Um, and used to run a firm out of New York that frankly built them for other people. And everything that I was being asked to build before I sold my last company was let's build this for kids. Let's build X for kids. Let's build a new banking product for millennials and Gen Z and below. And that's great. But at the same time, I just think it's crazy how much technology has been pointed down, and yet there is so much that we could do and we can do when we take our cutting edge technology and actually put it and give it to the people who need it the most. And that tends to be, in my opinion, older two categories of people: older adults, and then the families and the whole ecosystem that is around them and are involved in their money, who we'll talk about in a second. We call them financial caregivers. And if you are not a financial caregiver yet, you will be one, because everybody gets there at some point when you get involved in a loved one's money. So about 4 years ago, I sold my last thing and decided to build a new thing called Carefull. And it's Carefull has two L's, so it's care and full put together in one word. And and yeah, so I can I can talk about it a little bit. Shannon, what's a good place to start? I can go into it now, or maybe what's useful.
Yeah, give us a little history, like
Sure.
what you envisioned initially,
Totally.
and maybe tell us a little bit of where we are today and what the
Yeah.
future might look
Yeah. So we, decided to build something that frankly can spot a lot of the issues that families are looking for today, but they're doing it manually or they're just missing it. The overall idea is we want technology to watch accounts of all types, your checking, your parents' checking, your own savings, your brokerage account. We want to look at home title. We want to look at your passwords, your passport, your driver's license, your identity, your credit score. We want to quietly just monitor that, but we want to do that in a way that is looking for things that affect older adults specifically. And it's an entirely different world of things. And so about 4 years ago, we launched Carefull and let financial caregivers and older adults and people who just wanted a second set of eyes on things, we let them connect their accounts. That's what we do with Carefull. You can do that. You do that via our site. You tell us what you want us to protect, and then we watch. We don't have access to anything, to be very clear. We have what's called read-only access, so that we can spot what we call concerning patterns. And I'll talk a lot about what that means probably in this conversation. But just to give you an example, we're looking for a new love interest in maybe a parent's life. They may be moving money out in what's called a romance scam, which is a huge issue and growing over the last few years. We're looking for people buying gift cards, because I don't care if you're 25 buying gift cards, but if you're in a certain category, it's a money laundering technique to get to get money out of folks' accounts. And so we launched this whole really protection service that people sign up directly, or it's provided by their bank or their wealth advisor these days, or sometimes they're sometimes an elder law firm, and they can either give it to their parents, or they can use it to help their parents, or frankly they use it for themselves. And Shannon, to answer your question of where we started and where we are, two things have really taken off with this. The first is 60% of our users are people just using it for themselves. And we launched thinking that we were going to be almost entirely for that next generation who's involved in their parents' money. And it turns out it's almost 50-50 now. People just want, sometimes people don't feel comfortable involving their kids. And in fact, sometimes they trust their attorneys and lawyers and financial advisors more than they trust their kids sometimes. And
Sometimes.
sometimes, and so, or it's that they always trust their oldest daughter, but they don't trust their oldest son. And there's all these different dynamics that in the family. And so what we found is, to be successful here with what we'll talk about a little bit today, you have to be something that an older adult wants for themselves, not is happening to them, but something that feels like more agency, feels like more independence, feels like a second set of eyes on things that they should have anyway. And giving them that bit of control has, in terms of who sees what, has really skyrocketed our business. So that's one of two things that has happened. We've really taken off by really being something, making sure we are building something that older adults want for themselves as a service, versus we are entirely something to help them out from afar.
Yeah, and Todd, let me interrupt you right there just for
Sure.
a second to give a little feedback on what I see, and this may be helpful to some of our viewers out there.
Yeah.
We oftentimes will have clients come in and we have this thing called a pre-need consent against exploitation, where basically you say in advance, if I start to be giving my money away to a scammer, I want these people to be able to freeze my assets down.
Yes. Yes.
And what's interesting is when we first created this product, we thought, like, no one's going to want it. Like, no one's going to want it.
Yeah.
We thought maybe like 20% of people would have the insight to say, like, my brain might change and I might start giving my money away. I will tell you, everyone wants it.
I love it.
Like, every single client that comes in knows someone whose brain has changed.
Yes.
And they literally lost everything, given all their money away.
Yeah.
And they want to make sure that doesn't happen to them, because even though right now today they feel very confident in their financial management, they have seen other people who felt financially confident lose all their money.
Yeah.
It's very timely. Yes.
It's so interesting, Shannon. So we are seeing that as well. This is something people want for themselves. They are there's, depending on what number you pick, we see 27 billion of elder fraud mistakes every year, of self-inflicted issues, of issues from cognitive decline, and they are aware it's coming. Everybody knows that you get to this place, and so the idea of having something in place, not for maybe right this second, but something that is taking care of you and can spot a small problem or freeze or freeze assets at the right time. And so, I'm glad you bring it up. One of the most famous things that we look for in all of these patterns of, we can see cognitive decline and forgetfulness. One of the things I think we talked about years ago was that there's Johns Hopkins University study that showed that dementia and Alzheimer's can first be diagnosed in transactional data, right, in the wallet, 6 years before it's diagnosed in the doctor's office. So that's, if you think about, you've connected your finances to something like Carefull, we can see the signals, and there's a lot of different complex signals but I'll just to give you a few examples. So we're looking for a lot of signals kind of combining, but some of them include duplicate payments. That's the obvious one, but why? Why? Because duplicate payments is not just something you really like buying a lot. It is one of the top three things that happens if you buy the same gift over and over, right? So that's exact same payment. So not by itself, it's not a problem, but it is a signal if we start to see duplicate payments in certain patterns. Forgetfulness is another. So everyone that knows someone who's experienced cognitive decline or Alzheimer's, what's that trigger moment when you figure it out? You go over to their house, and you find that bill stack, and you're like, wait, what is it? Oh man! Like, and you sort of find the past due bill. And so what we see in the data, well before we get to a problem where something's shut off, is we say, okay, we're starting to see a pattern that looks like forgetfulness. Not even totally forgetting, but just like you used to pay in this pattern, but actually now you're starting to pay in what our brain can spot to look like forgetfulness. And our job in those moments is not to jump out of the closet here and say, bad news, you've got dementia, because nobody behaves that way. Everything happens sort of gradually. What we say is we noticed a concerning pattern. And think about how much easier it is for families when you have data and say, okay, here's a concerning pattern. Here are some things you can do. Let's set some things to auto pay. We're not giving away the keys. You're fine. But we're going to start to do some things to make sure that the train stays on the tracks. Or we might just permission your daughter or son to have password access now, because maybe it might be time for that. Or maybe not. Maybe all you want to do is read about the signs of dementia. Either way, we want to be first. Right? We want to be way earlier than I gave all my money to a political campaign.
Right.
Which
And,
is
and
what
I've got to jump back in on what
yeah.
you said about this Hopkins study that
Yes.
says, we're starting to see these things 6 years before this diagnosis event. And, we've had a lot of brain researchers on talking about, this time before diagnosis, which ends up being about 10 years,
Yeah.
where we don't have science-based evidence for the exploitable brain or the brain that's scammable. Like, we have the science for the incapacitated brain, but it's that time, the 10 years before that diagnosis, that we just don't have clinical ability to assess it. But man, we have the Carefull app.
We can see it.
So you guys are like filling in the gap to some extent by like noticing these like repeated patterns of forgetting to pay a bill or paying a bill twice.
Yeah.
And that information is critical. I mean, it's actually, I love this because
Yeah.
it's exactly matches what the brain science is telling us, which is this 10 years, we're seeing these brain changes.
Yeah.
And really from year 10 to year 20, which is usually death, we have data, but it's this time before where people are so vulnerable because you wouldn't know if you met them on the street that they can't assess risk and they can't tell the difference between the truth and a lie. So
Exactly.
this is really a beautiful safety net. And I love how the hands of control remain with our senior, our
Yes.
vulnerable person. So do they start to want to put some of those guardrails on? And it sounds like things like putting things on auto bill pay and having that monitoring, or maybe even like starting to turn over passwords to a child
Yes.
who's trustworthy,
Yeah.
can be helpful. Yeah,
So
I get
let's talk about that. I'm glad you brought this up, Shannon. So let's take that 10 years. This is the messy 10 years
so
that a family relationships start to strain, because who's actually, what is that? We call this the Thanksgiving problem. So for anyone on the call that is touched this whole ecosystem in some way, the Thanksgiving, and you're smiling because you probably it's intuitive, right? Thanksgiving problem is everybody gets together, has a big fight about money, and frankly fights about the condition of mom or dad, because mom or dad are walking around fine. We're not late stage anything. In fact, they're living their lives. They're going to see grandkids. They're coming out like, but do they have the right? But right. What we see there's some slipping judgment. Maybe maybe they've signed up for a subscription that the family can't see. What we have are signals, but not someone who's incapacitated, and not someone we want to treat like they're incapacitated. So what we have in this, like, as you said, sort of 10-year earlier phase, what that does is it puts strain and frankly risk into family relationships. And here's what I mean by that. When more people get involved and start sharing passwords early on, you get two things. You get more help, and you also have more fraud and more exploitation. And so 92% of financial caregivers transact from someone else's account. So what are these kids doing, right? There are 45 million people in the US today who are helping out on a day-to-day basis an aging parent. And then what that means is they are sharing passwords with them. They are 92% of them transact from their accounts. Some people commingle money. And so now a lot of this comes from a good place, because of course, what else can you do? Before Carefull, the only thing you could do is go in and impersonate your parents and sort of make sure there's no fraud. You don't know what to look for, but you're helping anyway. You have kids, you have a job. But what also happens when you start sharing passwords is frankly you have families, and not everyone is a good actor all the time, and you have the adult child who maybe is not the favorite daughter, and maybe who feels entitled to take their inheritance a little early. It gets even grayer because you have the person who is a meaningful caregiver who's doing the work over there, but feels entitled because they're doing the work over there now. And so it starts to get into this messy stuff of, well, I'm here and mom's not using it. And then you have, let's say, the siblings, just to give you examples that we see every day. You got the sibling in Los Angeles who's just sending checks, doing nothing, but they're sending checks over, and then suddenly there's not money, and they're like, "What happened?" And what we have, just to maybe take a step back, is this 10 years of messy family relations, messy responsibilities, who's in charge, who's picking these things up, who's sharing passwords, and what is needed is to keep this person in control. We want to put technology for living. This is not technology for winding anything down. We want to enable this person to transact safely, to be out there in the world safely. But I want to spot it when she gives money to charity. I just want to spot it. I don't want to stop it yet. But that brings up a second example of we launched in January a module called charitable giving, and we, by the way, in terms of brain science and this whole area, giving is one of the most interesting areas of elder fraud and abuse and all of these different kinds of things, because it is not fraud, but it's close. It is really close.
Yeah.
As soon as your loved ones give, they're on every list. And so what we did is we launched, and by the way, giving isn't bad, but it's also an indicator of judgment. So it's how often you give, how much do you give, who you give to. Family comes over and they say, "Wait, well, you did what to who?" Um, and so we launched a partnership with a service called Charity Navigator. And if you haven't seen Charity Navigator, take a look. It's a nonprofit. So we took all of Charity Navigator's data and we plugged it into Carefull. And now every time someone gives, we can tell you within an hour if you gave to a 1-star charity versus a 5-star charity. We will tell you, did you know that you gave to a recurring deduction to a 1-star charity, right? So you decided that's a problem for you. All I'm doing is going to give you the information back. I'm not turning it off. But the American Heart Association is not the same thing as the Association of American Hearts, right? So we want to. This is this big messy area around giving, and so hopefully that makes sense, Shannon. But
Yeah,
giving is a
it
really
does.
fascinating area.
It does. And I will say that there is this we see somewhat of a decrease in the ability to assess risk, intuition, like in that intuitive knowing when someone's not telling you the truth,
Yes,
um, inability to kind of tell the difference between someone being truthful and not telling the truth. We know scientifically that that's reducing during this time.
yes,
But the other thing that also appears to happen from the science side is this increase in trust. So, like, that charitable giving thing is like kind of the perfect storm.
absolutely.
And we see it a lot. And it's not just charitable, it's also political giving.
Oh,
The political giving I
yeah,
see rampantly, and it feeds, if that's your currency, right? So
yes,
we know when we're talking to scammers, they're trying to keep you on the phone to figure out what your currency is. So then
yes,
they can craft the scam to deliver to you based on, are you a strong political affiliator? Are you really into charitable giving for this particular type of charity? And then they craft that scam for you.
yeah.
So the beautiful thing about the Carefull app is that when those dollars start going out, your caregiver, your financial trusted contact person is going to be notified of that.
Yes. So let's just jump into that one, for example. So we had to launch an entire module around political contributions. So we have charitable giving, but the political issues. Of course, you can spot it. Most people are surprised when we say the political donations and contributions have been one of the number, like they're in the top 5 certainly, depending. And this year it'll be number 1, I'm sure. Um, both political parties, I do mean both, have convinced older adults that the world is ending. And they do this via text message and ad and all kinds of stuff. They know who they're targeting. They know exactly why. They know the age group. They know the polarization that we're in right now. So both have convinced them that they have to pick your tagline, save democracy, save whatever. And they have them sign up for a couple of things. First, it's a donation, so that's already bad. But the problem is it's a recurring deduction. So we our political module is looking for 2 things. But first of all, we want to see that it's a political issue so that we can make sure that we have different content for political donations than we send someone for just general charity. But also the number one thing that political parties will do is you don't uncheck the box and suddenly you're giving every month. And some of these
Right.
candidates are not relevant anymore. Some of them they're going to PACs and super PACs. And so political is its own like hornet's nest of scam. Why? Because again, let's go back to the Thanksgiving problem. Where are the big opinions, right? It's because they're finding older adults who are passionate about these things for good reasons.
Yeah.
They tap into that passion exactly as you're saying, Shannon, and more than was the case 10 years ago. You're going to get a passionate opinion about somebody if you ask, than was true 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So they lean right into that. And so maybe just to pick up on your what you were saying, Shannon, on trusted contacts, Carefull works on what we call a trusted contact infrastructure. And when someone signs up for Carefull, you add, well, who would you trust in case of a medical emergency? Who would you trust if you had to ask, if you thought you were being scammed, who would you call first to check? And what we really want is what we call a map of we call it share of family, meaning we want to understand the relationship, the contact information, and then the person, whoever's using Carefull should permission eventually their loved ones to see alerts, right? So if there is a scam, right, the financial caregiver can receive an alert. If it's something transactional, now like, this is an alert, so we're not giving anyone access. We're just letting people know, and that's what we want. We don't want to give people just passwords and say have at it. We want to put people into a read-only, transparent environment. So trusted contacts is kind of the beating heart of that. Most people, my dad's a good example. My dad uses Carefull. My dad wants me nowhere near his money, but he likes having Carefull, and he likes that it gives him $1 million of identity theft insurance. He likes that it looks at his house. I'm a trusted contact, but he has not permissioned me to receive anything yet.
Okay.
But what's important is that what we want for families is to have the infrastructure in place.
Right.
And when something happens, and when there's a medical issue, he can turn on my access to Carefull's password manager. So now I can help out. I don't have to dig through the drawer to find the passwords. He can say, okay, I want you to start seeing some of these emails I'm getting. So think of Carefull, and if it's not Carefull, think of anything like that's in your clients' worlds or families' worlds. What we want is cross-generational infrastructure to be in place so that people stop just sharing passwords with each other.
Right.
Say, have at my money. That's where it all goes wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, we know that over 50% of exploitation is committed by family members.
Yep.
So it's not made up. These are statistically proven that unfortunately that is the case. Now, there's that whole other side of the scam and exploitation world, which is targeted, and a lot of times it is caregivers or people who just get access,
Yes.
and Carefull addresses that as well. Let's talk for a minute, Todd, about like the help desk, which is awesome, and the identity theft protection. And some of these things, like if somebody comes across something and they're like, I'm not sure if it's legit or if it's made up. What is that? What part of Carefull helps us with those kinds?
So think of Carefull as a big stack of protections. So it goes from really simple to really, really complicated, like really, really complicated being like we spot dementia, we spot romance scams. Those things are really hard signals to find, but that's the big tricky stuff. Also in that stack are things that we consider to be hygiene for a person or a family or a couple. That should be $1 million of identity theft insurance, meaning you should be covered. Legal fees, you should be covered for recovery if someone is opening up accounts in your name. We want to have your home title monitored. That's also part of the stack. There's reverse mortgages maybe you shouldn't have signed up for. We want to catch that fast. There are all kinds of liens on your house. Your house is a pretty big asset, but it's a separate database. So we want to check that. We want to check that once a quarter. Dark web monitoring, and whether you're familiar with dark web or not, it's just where your information is sold. We monitor that. You are. So we want to see those things. And this is about finding where your information is, but this is what we think of as basic hygiene. We have a password manager. It's come up a few times. We want your passwords out of the kitchen drawer. We want your passwords out off of that Post-it note, and they shouldn't be your kids' names anymore. We want them in a place that is secure, military grade encryption. And these things don't need to be complicated. A lot of times password managers, I think sometimes they can be more trouble than they're worth, or more features than you want. We want something safe is what we really want. And then when we want to change a password, we want to make sure we change it in the right place. And so there's a couple of things. Two more features to stack on there. One is something called Scam Check. And what Scam Check is, which is what I think Shannon was referring to, is if you get an email that you're not sure about, if you get a text, that fake UPS text that everyone in America gets,
Mm.
like, hey, you have a delivery, can you update your address? Just to get on my soapbox for a second, no one will ever ask you for your address. I have to say this every time I speak on anything. Like, it's you, no one is entitled to your information. It's just not the way any agency works, right? But all of that stuff, right? And by the way, they look real. It's not fair to expect you to catch every scam on your own. There's too many. They're coming too fast. So if you're not sure, we have you just email it and forward it to something called Scam Check, which is basically part of the Carefull service, and we will tell you if it's real or not, right? And what we want to do is slow down. You don't have to click on that thing right away if you're not sure. I want the default not to be just send it to your kid, or click on it and see if it looks fishy. Don't do that. Send it to us, and we will tell you. So that's the first. The second and related part is we have people onshore. They're actually in Florida. Um, who pick up the phone and will talk to you, or talk to your, and this is a, in a world of, you know in, complicated technology. I think we expect everything to take care of itself, and the tech does a lot of the lift, but so does just talking to someone and
Yeah.
walking them through something in a way that doesn't feel like it's in the middle of that relationship between a family, because think how loaded that argument is. Like, you're coming in with a feeling, they're coming in, they see it coming. Go back to the Thanksgiving problem. You know what that feels like. So when we pick up the phone, we have people who are trained to have this conversation, and sometimes it's just all we do is look at scams all day. All we do is see complicated family stuff. It's not as simple as a scam. Like, my daughter's asking to move money out. Is there, or wants to open a joint? He'll give you an example. Sometimes they'll call and say, my son wants to open a joint checking account with me. Is that a good idea? Well, different kinds of joint accounts have different kinds of inheritance issues, right? And sometimes
Oh,
you need to talk them through, and I can see Shannon, you're gonna pass out with like all the
please no joint accounts.
please no joint accounts, right? But like, the answer is like, how do I do my parents' taxes? How do, so all these what we call financial caregiving questions, we have people that will, all the way from, they'll help you freeze your credit, they'll call the bank with you, we'll change your passwords with you, we'll do the stuff to get you back to good. Sometimes you've downloaded something terrible on your computer, we're going to get you back to good. So that's a little, don't call your son, we're going to take care of you. So that's a little bit about having Carefull. And then some of it is about,
Yeah.
yeah, questions and answers.
Yeah, I think, and actually, you guys, I want you all to know that we do have a question and answer
Oh,
option. So feel free to put some questions in. I want to hit back though, Todd, with what you're talking about. And I see this in my clients, like the fear, there's two fears. The one fear is that their right to manage their own assets will be taken away and put
yes,
in the hands of either the child who's the spendthrift, who doesn't, or the other child who will, overspend.
yes,
It's like one or the other. They never really match what that parent would do.
yes.
That's the first fear. But the second fear, which I think is probably the one that most drives this strategy of using the help desk instead, is that the more things that the child learns that you've gotten wrong, the
Yes.
child will then be pushing you to move out of the house into
One-
facilities.
100%. So those are the two you've nailed. So let's start with that. Let's start with that one. There's this, first of all, 100% of older adults make mistakes. 100%. In fact, we all do them. But that is not particularly that of the generation that's sort of dealing with this now. I got this, I'm okay, is a big piece of identity. It's a big piece of maintaining independence, and fear of independence is bigger than anything. They would, to put it this way, I have the data to prove it. They would rather get scammed than have you take the keys away.
Right.
They would rather get scammed again. It's even worse. Like, they'd rather get scammed twice than have someone reduce agency in some way, because they've seen a generation above, maybe not get treated so well. They remember, like, they're like, that's not happening to me. I'm hanging on. I'm sitting in my place as long as possible. So this isn't coming from a bad place. It's just coming. It's coming from this truth of like, I would much rather I'd rather take my chances than let someone in, because I don't want them to see that I signed up for this, collectible coin thing, which we'll roll your eyes at, but they all sign up for it. I signed up for this subscription. I shouldn't have. I have 3 cable bills, or actually maybe I don't need this little stuff. But let's go back to Thanksgiving. oh, they're going to see I have Netflix and I didn't cancel cable, and that's kind of dumb. I'm double paying and now I look dumb. So that's stuff. Like, it's, by the way, it's a fear. I think fear, Shane, is the right term. It's a fear because it's a fear of looking like you're not in control, and that is going to turn into not in control. And so what's what's really important here is you can take care of someone without removing their control. You can be safer without giving up any control. So I think that's really important thing that people need to now understand is you can use technology and our service desk and have someone, a second set of eyes, and catch things and fight back and have insurance. And you can do all this yourself, right? Without having to give up this idea or start to let on that maybe you're, that you made mistakes. And that's really important for, I think, the whole careful value proposition.
Yeah, and I will just tell you that we have every single client who comes in to our office and enrolls in our life care planning practice, which is like, full 360 protection. You're like in it for a year basis, and usually people just stay in forever.
Yes.
But when they're in that program with us, we immediately enroll them in the Carefull app, every single client that walks through the door. And at first, the clients are like, I don't need that. Like, I don't want that. Like, I don't want that monitoring. And then we start to talk about, what it really is.
Yes.
And after they've been in the program for a couple of months, it's like, they really love the monitoring. They absolutely love the fact that they have that fraud protection. They love the fact that there's a help desk so they avoid having to call, the child to report on themselves. Like, it really is something that, has become part of our practice model, and we love it for our clients, and we found that they've really benefited from that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's the idea of during this life stage, there's a way to just transact and live more safely. Yeah, particularly, we've seen 80% spikes in some of these scams since COVID because they know Venmo and Zelle, unfortunately, are two of the reasons. For those that don't know, if your bank probably offers digital payments, if you're not using them yourselves, your kids are using them, the world has taken all the friction out of moving money around, right? So I love that. It's great to pay my babysitters. It is great for everyone, but older adults, because it's just too what we want. The grandparent scam is just, for those that don't know, but it's a famous one. They call you in the middle of the night and they pretend to be your grandson or granddaughter, say you're in trouble. Don't tell mom, but I need to send me money to get out of jail right now. And it works because you want to be the hero to them. So all these things are meant to get you when you're not ready, to get you when you're tired, to get you when you're uneasy. And then now with Venmo and Zelle, it's, you can do it on your phone. And so what we would say is, there's a way now to live. We don't consider this about any kind of winding down phase, right? This generation is going to be around transacting for 20, 30 years. This is a long life stage.
Right.
You should be in it safely.
Yeah.
Right? You should be in it in a way that enables you to be in control. We want you to stay in control of your stuff. And we're going to do that by not letting small problems become really big problems. So that's a little of the philosophy behind it.
Yeah. And I always tell people the statistics on being scammed. It doesn't happen one time. It's like 7 times is the average number, of somebody who gets re-victimized again and again, maybe not by the same scammer either, because once you fall victim to the scam, like Todd's talking about, the value of your information on the dark web goes up. So that person who just scammed you for $25 now can sell your information for a whole lot more money than that when they're selling it on the dark web. So it's like each time you fall victim to these scams, you become a bigger target and your information is more valuable to those scammers.
That's a really good point. That's a very good point. The repeat nature of it and people, only 1 in 44 of these things goes reported. No one wants to report themselves, and nobody wants to report their kids.
Right. So, and you just talked about, I wrote down the number that you talked about, 27 billion.
Yeah.
And like, it's so interesting because the FBI number is like 3 billion. And the AARP number, it looks like they're projecting for 2024. The projected number is 50 billion.
Yeah.
So like, it all varies based on who your reporting source is. But in any event, it's going up and up and up and up and up. And 27 billion, 50 billion, it's an insane amount of money considering, like a small country's economy is like, 3 billion.
I
So
I couldn't agree more.
let me
Yeah.
jump to some of these questions. And Todd,
Sure.
I got the website wrong in the chat, you
Oh,
guys.
of
So
course.
Todd's got the correct, it's actually .com, getcarefull.com, not .org. So I just want to make sure that we address that. So we have a question. What is the average age of the client who enters the program and uses the
Oh, great question. So, it goes up and down a little bit, but right now the average age is 61, which is not elderly.
app?
And
Wow.
it's because these are people. These are, by the way, to ask a 60-year-old person is not old, right? Now there's a little bit of an average there that's bringing it to the middle. Why? Because we have financial caregivers who use it too, right? So we have people in their
Right.
30s and 40s who are using it for someone else. We have people in their 70s, 80s, 90s, but the average age of someone using it for themselves is about 61, 62, right? And it's just hygiene now for living. So and by the way, just one more, because I love the age question, because it takes me on reminds me of a couple of things we've learned over the years, even since we've been working with Shannon. Uh, you used to be able to tell a lot more by age. And I think we're losing our ability to know about people based on their age. Like, I mean, the last thing your bank did for you is when you turned 55, of all things, they gave you free checks. Like the last thing the financial services industry really did for people. And think of 55 is not even close to old today. So we used to think, okay, someone 65, that's maybe someone who's using it for themselves, maybe their kids. You know what? There is this entire world we have seen using Carefull that's 65 taking care of an 85-year-old mom. And so sometimes it's 65 for themselves, sometimes it's 65 because it's for themselves, and also they're doing the work for mom. You really can't tell, but
You really can't.
yeah, you really can't.
Some of our biggest exploitation cases involve men and women in their 60s,
Yes.
where we've had $10 million, 7 million, 3 million. We've got one right now for 2.5, and they are in their 60s.
Yes.
So it's just the thinning of the cortical insula in the brain, that we're seeing that kind of earlier onset of some of those cognitive issues.
Let me for the sake of for fun, let me give you one thread, and I want to, if there are any questions, please keep them coming. One of the things that underlies a lot of money moving for the wrong reasons is, I'm going to put romance in quotes, right? And and that does not just mean you're being scammed. So it is, you're in your 60s, you have a new spouse. That money is now somehow being routed from an annuity or it's now moving from the original children of someone to like some stepchildren or some children that were like, and I'm sure you see this once it gets to crisis mode. But once you start getting into we see more and more dating in 60s and 70s. We see more and more new love interest, more and more, and that sounds like an adorable story, but it actually is also the beginning of all different kinds of strange money movements and arguments over where it is. And so, why do I bring this up? The reason Carefull is very useful in this place is sunlight is a wonderful disinfectant. We have great technology, but just understanding what we call at Carefull, we call it systematic drain. So everyone's obsessed with, for good reasons, a big chunk of money moving out. People like to focus on that. Just as I think, and frankly, we would argue more sinister, is $10,000 a month moving to someone in darkness, right? And you're like, oh wait, how long? And as you've been moving to this to which person in the family out? And so transparency, just seeing it, just servicing it. Everybody scatters. All the bad stuff evaporates when you're on Carefull, because you can start to see this stuff. So
Right.
yeah,
And the algorithm's going to pick up those kinds of out of character transfers.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
over this 4-year time period, the algorithm has gotten better and better at
Yes.
just sending out an alert. Hey, this is an unusual way that this money is moving from this person who normally acted differently.
Yes, concerning pattern, we would call it. So when someone signs up for Carefull, within 60 minutes, we will have looked back 2 years and created a model for that individual.
Wow.
So we
That's
don't need it to learn, it learns, but we don't need it to, about an hour after they've signed up, we know what normal looks like for everybody. So, and so normal for you is not the same thing as normal for someone else. So it's not just sending a, hey, you spent at Home Depot and isn't that weird? That actually isn't very hard and it's not really useful. You just get a bunch of alerts you don't need. It's there's the meaningful behavior change in a way that has our attention. And that's right. Okay, this is a concerning pattern. This is a new person in your life. Great. New chair.
Yeah.
So we want to notify through that kind of lens.
And I just will add on to that, just because we practice, this is the field that we do a lot of work in. It starts super small transfers, you know, it's that caregiver, and it starts off with they're just being a handyman. Now all of a sudden, a year later, you see that all your property is titled in the handyman's name. And I mean, we actually had a case like this. So yeah, so it's for real.
Yes.
Okay, Todd, I want to just hit this one last question from my buddy Alan asks, with Carefull, do I still need experience to lock my accounts and monitor identity theft?
Great question. I think are you talking about Experian, the credit monitoring service? Short answer is no. So we use TransUnion's. Credit monitoring is 5% of the fraud, but we think it's part of the stack of hygiene. So if you're using, something old like a LifeLock, or you're using like TransUnion, Experian, we take care of that. And so the short answer is you shouldn't have both services. You should never pay for credit monitoring is kind of something we also say. So if, let's say there was a huge AT&T breach a couple of weeks ago, there's one of these a month. Dell was actually a week ago, 72 million social security numbers out there. You absolutely should have credit monitoring. It should probably be given to you by somebody. If you don't, but you shouldn't be paying like 10, 15 bucks a month. Or your client shouldn't. Sign up for Carefull. It's free. It will come free with that.
All right, Todd, I know everyone's question is, what does this cost?
What does it cost?
So, what does that look like as far as, what would this cost? I mean, that's a big factor, I think, especially for our lower income people.
Yeah. So, there's lots of ways that people get Carefull. So we have two models. One is, and frankly, our most popular, model today is it's paid for by or as part of a service that they're getting elsewhere, meaning your bank provides you Carefull because you're with that bank. Your wealth manager, your financial advisor. So we're partnered with Mass Mutual. We are partnered with Nationwide. If you use them for insurance, we're in the Nationwide app now as a perk. So the best way to get Carefull, by the way, is to have your bank or wealth advisor or service provider or lawyer have that be part of the service that you're paying. Right?
Yeah, like your lawyer. You
guys. Have your lawyer. You're paying your lawyer. You're paying your lawyer. Your lawyer wants you to be safe. Your lawyer wants less problems. It's in everybody's interest for this for you to be taken care of. It's part of good service. It's part of a modern practice. And just for a little plug, Shannon was really early on thinking about this stuff on behalf of clients. So, and it's become popular since, but people who think about this know. So anyone who has an interest in your money, if they don't provide it, you should tell them. So this is the little plug for us. If you're a financial advisor, if your bank does not provide Carefull, and lots do, but if they don't, tell them to. Send them the website, and they will, because it's not that hard for them to do. They pay us a monthly fee, and then they provide it to everybody. So that's the primary way people are getting it today. That said, people sign up for us every day at the website that you see, which is getcarefull with 2Ls.com. And then it's about it's about $25 a month. And so that's not it's expensive, right? It's not nothing, but it's in terms of the a couple of things I should mention. One, we have a new feature where you can give an entire set of protections to a spouse or a kid or a loved one. So when you get Carefull for yourself, actually comes with an entirely second social security number that will protect as well. So you get Carefull. Our number one most asked for feature was, can I give this to my spouse? Can I give this to my kid? Can I give this to my parent? And the answer now is yes. So as soon as you finish onboarding to Carefull, it says, who else do you want to onboard? So it will send an invitation. So it winds up, so it looks like that. But right now you'll see $25 a month if you sign up in any way related to Shannon. If we'll probably have to refresh it, but we also have a Shannon, kind of Shannon Miller.
We give it.
They just give it. Yeah. So if you're associated with him, you're in good shape. But you're associated with Shannon, you're in good shape. But you can always sign up directly, and you can do that on the website for about $25 a month.
All right, well, great. Well, Todd, I know we're kind of out of time, but I know that there were a couple questions. I think we hit them all. Thank you so much for doing this app. and for everything that you continue to add into it. I mean, it started as just this thing. I used to say, like, if you pay a bill twice, if you forget to pay a bill, it sends out an alert. It is so much more than that.
I appreciate that.
And we really just, I appreciate you as a human, like engaging on actually what this could potentially mean to people who are in the throes of an exploitable brain.
Real,
So I just
yeah. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for having us here. This doesn't work without people like yourselves who have been in this for a long time, who have points of view on it, who are advancing the field of it. You're in there, with your sleeves rolled up in individual, families, and making sure that everyone's going to be okay. We want to be a tool in this, right? There's so much. We're one of these things where when Carefull works, everybody wins, right? It's good for insurance companies. It's good for the bank. They want to protect the assets. It's good for people. It's good for families because you don't fight with your family all the time. So what we really want is this is one of those rare things. There's a reason I'm so passionate about it. It's one of those things. It's easy to start a business. It's hard to start a business where you're not taking from one pie and moving it to the other. And this is one of these kind of things. The only thing that it does is keep the assets in one place. So we're proud of it. We're honored to be invited to stuff like this, and would always love to continue to support you guys. And if you have any other questions, either me personally, or we now have a team of 40. We're up to 40 people.
Wow.
We'll always be happy to answer a question and help you out.
Great. Keep growing. Keep growing, Todd, because you're in the trenches, and I don't think there's anything else comparable out there, not even close.
Not
So
today. Not yet.
good stuff.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks again. And I'm not sure what our next webinar is. I think it might be smart technology, if I'm not mistaken, in the home. But we sure appreciate you coming on, Todd, and we really love the Carefull app. So
Thanks so much.
thanks, everybody. Take care.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.